Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, depending on what side of the pond you're on. And welcome to the League One Extravaganza! My name is Phil Kennedy, and I'm joined by Tony Robinson today, where we're going to break down all 24 teams in EFL League One. Now, if you've listened to the show before, you know that Tony and myself are both Accrington Stanley supporters. This is an Accrington Stanley centric show. But this year, we've decided that we want to kind of spread things out a bit. And now every week, Tony and I are going to do a show where we kind of run down the whole EFL League One. We're still going to focus on Accrington because that's, kind of our core coverage, and that's the team that we both watch the most. But we're really excited to get into some of these other teams. So, since we probably have some people tuning in for the first time, Tony, why don't you start off by telling the listeners a little bit about yourself and your history of watching football?
Sure, Phil. That's a great introduction. That epic sound effects there. That was that's pretty good. I've been following football ever since I was a kid, and Accrington Stanley is my hometown team. As a youngster, I used to go and watch Burnley in the old First Division before I emigrated to Canada. And now, to make a long story short, I follow Stanley. I try and go back to see some matches every year. Unfortunately, with COVID this year, that's been put on hold. So we're focusing more time on doing some work on the podcast and covering not only Accrington but League One. And it's going to be an interesting season, and hopefully we can give some insight on the season ahead, starting tonight.
That's fantastic, Tony, and it's just a pleasure to have you on here with me again for this next English League One season that's coming up. And, this is really kind of the next step in the evolution of the show, if you will, because when we started out, what we really wanted to do was be able to provide information on all of the lower leagues to our North American audience. And we kind of started off with Accrington Stanley being our favorite team, also being our flagship team. And last season we interviewed just about every first team player. We've had a number of Accrington legends on. We've had manager John Coleman, assistant manager Jimmy Bell. We've had John Doolin, who is an assistant coach. We've had, of course, Andy Holt, the chairman, on. I mean, we've had just about anybody and everybody Accrington, and we're really looking forward to having some new Accrington interviews. I believe that we've brought in 8 new players this year, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. Yeah. But since we're going alphabetically, Tony, you had kind of mentioned to me a few months ago that you didn't think that a team should just be able to jump to the front of the alphabet and by putting AFC in front of their name. And I tend to agree with that. So we're going to move AFC Wimbledon just to Wimbledon and move them down to W. And now, not to upset the Wimbledon fans so they will not be dead last, we will do MK Dons last, whose fans were not really worried about upsetting because, well...
I think that pretty well explains it, Phil. Well done.
All right, so we're going to start with Accrington. We're going to go team by team, and what's going to happen is Tony is going to give a prediction of where he thinks that each of the 24 teams is going to finish in the League One table. He's going to give his kind of reasoning, and then I'm going to say whether I think that his prediction is accurate, too high, or too low. We're going to kind of give an idea of who's come and gone from the different teams, and just try to tell everybody who might be tuning into League One for the first time just an introduction to who each team is and who some of the key players involved are.
Well, before I give you my position on where I think they'll finish, this season is really going to be a tough one to handicap. I mean, I think it's tougher to handicap the League One season this year than it is to handicap a two-horse race. You've got the salary cap that's come into place. You've got teams that are cutting back on their size of their squads, releasing more players in most cases than the players coming in. So and teams that are sort of hoping basically for survival. I think that's one of the words that we should be conscious of this season is survival, not only financially, because of the restrictions on fans, but also survival to stay in League One. So I think that's going to be the main focus of quite a few teams.
I'm glad that you brought that up because that was an excellent thing that we did need to mention to people first who aren't familiar. This is the first year that League One has implemented a salary cap. And one thing I did want to point out is that salary cap is for the season. It's $3.25 million, which is 3 million English pounds is about the conversion there. That covers wages, bonus, agent fees, and any other money paid to the club. So basically, there's not a per player limit or anything like that. The other thing is that any existing contracts are they're figured into the salary cap at a league average. So if you happen to have a guy on your team that was making $5 million, I don't think anybody has that, but say that you did, that guy would still count as a league average until the end of his current contract. So, I mean, certainly this is going to give teams like Sunderland and Portsmouth an even bigger hurry to want to get up to the championship, because once their current players expire, then they're going to be back to a level playing field of, they can't spend more money than the other teams right now while they still have their current contract. So a player that's on a current contract has some extra value to it right now, which I think is a strange factor that we've never had before.
Yeah, and I think this the salary cap, I don't see it being a permanent structure in the league. I think once the fans are it's opened up to the fans as a regular normal season. I think for the sake of the pyramid system, I think the salary cap will be put aside and go back to the way it has been, because I think salary cap is good for survival, but it creates a gap between the lower leagues and the championship and even the Premier League, because if those two leagues don't have a salary cap, then the distance between the two it gets greater. And a team being promoted from League One, with a salary cap in 2 years going into the championship, is going to be that much more removed from the group in the championship. So I don't see this as a permanent thing. I think once we see some normalcy in back in the attendance, then I think we'll see the salary cap tossed aside.
Yeah, I think that a term that Dr. David Kilpatrick, who was on the show with us last week, used was training wheels, in terms of when he was talking about the MLS with like the single entity system. And to me, obviously the English Football League is so old and established that using the word training wheels is a bit odd. So I'm not going to say the salary cap is like training wheels. It's more like a set of crutches to help.
Well, yeah, it's like a safety net, isn't it? Yeah, crutches are safety net. That's what it is.
To help the league get through COVID 2019. So, say if you break your foot, for example, they give you a set of crutches. You use the crutches until your foot healed, and then you don't use the crutches forever. So, I mean, that's why I think the salary cap can really be kind of the crutches that allow the league to get through the limited attendance and the COVID shutdowns and that. And like you said, I mean, unless the Premier League were to go to a salary cap system, which is never going to happen unless La Liga and Bundesliga and, you know, all of Europe would have to agree on a salary cap for that to happen, then it's not a long-term solution, like you said. But we don't want to spend the whole show talking about salary caps because we got 24 teams to get to. So, Tony, let's hear your prediction on our beloved Accrington Stanley. Where do you have the Reds at on your list?
Well, I you know, as much as I'd like to say, my heart says, you know, I'd like to see him challenging for a playoff position, you know, but realistically, survival is the key. And I have Accrington coming in at 17th this year. It's probably not what a lot of people would like to hear, but I think there's so many teams in and around Accrington that are going to be in the same boat that, anything above 20 or up will be a success. But I am finishing 17th, though.
Well, Tony, I'm going to say that you have right about what I was thinking, because I was thinking anywhere between 15th and 20th. So
that's cool. Yeah.
You're pretty much right in the middle of what I'm thinking. And John Coleman, no John Coleman team has ever been relegated, so they certainly have that working in their favor. The biggest concern, obviously, is losing Jordan Clark. He was their best player last year from an offensive standpoint. They sold Callum Johnson to Pompey today, actually. That's another experienced player on the back line. They have brought in 8 new signings. To me, though, the biggest concern is the goalkeeping position, which it's no knock on Toby Savin, because I mean, we haven't seen enough of Toby Savin to know what we have. And to me, that's the concern. I mean, you have a 20-year-old keeper who just made his first professional start at the Carabao Cup game the other day. He didn't play poorly by any means, but it's just, last year you had Ebtimov. He's moved on to the Bulgarian League. And then you had Joe Versick, who is now going to be at Doncaster. And I wish that we could have found a way to bring Versick back. He was a guy that was on loan from Stoke City. I'm thinking it's just a matter of Doncaster must have made a better offer, or do you think that Accrington and John Coleman think that Savin is their long-term keeper? I mean, he is an academy guy.
Well, yeah, you made a valid point about Versick, because bringing him back on loan would have allowed for Toby to have another year of experience learning, not only from Versick, but learning playing with the first team squad. But I think you're correct. I think it's you've got one goalie that, and the scouting reports on him is very good, and he's got tons and tons of talent, and I'm sure he can do the job. But in this league, an injury, you're just one injury away from going to the youth keeper. So I think they need to bring somebody in for competition to drive Toby to be a better keeper. But that's an area of concern. And I think it's like a lot of the other teams too. With the new players they brought in, it's going to take time to adjust. But I think that, from my point of view, the signings and the loan players they brought in, the quality is undoubtedly there. And that's one of the things we forecasted before, is that teams are going to be able to bring in quality players because there's going to be more players available. And I think that's the case. I think it's going to take a little time to gel. But I think there's potential there, but it's a question of how quickly they come together.
I've got a question. I'm going to throw a name at you here. Josh Vickers, he was the keeper for Lincoln last year. He was the keeper for Lincoln when they won the League Two championship 2 years ago. Lincoln let him go. He has not found a club yet. Do you think that that's a guy that Accrington could potentially look at trying to bring in, or do you think that he's just too experienced of a guy where if you bring him in, he's going to want to start?
Well, it's all a question of how much he wants to play, and is he willing to come to a club with the idea that he may not be the number one, but he will get some game time. And if you get to the point where he's got no club, then all of a sudden it's an easy decision to make. And it could be where some of these players are holding out for, hoping for something good to come along, and then they're going to have to sort of say, listen, I got to get a job. And he would be a good keeper. And I don't know if Aaron Chapman is available. He was released, I think, at the end of last season, and he would be good competition as well. But we definitely need to bring in somebody that's willing to drive Toby Savin and willing to not play every match, but get his game time.
Yeah, I mean, because the reality of the situation is it's even less so much of a knock on Savin or anything like that, because like I said, we don't really know. He's an unknown quantity. But if Savin gets hurt, or the fact that you're talking a 46-game season plus cup games, you have Liam Isherwood as your backup right now. He's an academy kid, just barely turned 18 years old. Never had any pro experience or anything like that. And I have a hard time believing that he would be ready to step into the number one role if Savin did go down.
Yeah, I think John Coleman's smart enough to know and realize that he's going to need to bring somebody in. So I think we just leave that one to the point where we expect somebody to come in, and it's more a question of not if, but more a question of when they come in, because the transfer window is still open. So the business is not completed yet.
Yeah, that's a great point. And we made another loan signing today, which, like I said, we're going to talk about later. So what we're going to do is we're going to roll through 11 more teams after we finish talking about Accrington here, which I just had one last point that I wanted to go over before we move on to our next team. We're going to do 11 more teams, and then that's going to be part one of this episode. And then part two, what we're going to do is start off by going over quickly the 8 new signings, the 8 new players that have come into Accrington this year. And then we'll run through the other 12 teams just to kind of give you an outline of where we're going to go. And I know we've spent a long time on Accrington, but of course that is our flagship team. But we are going to get to the other teams here really quickly. But right, before we move on from Accrington, we have to talk about how big of a deal is losing Jordan Clark to Luton. I mean, Tony, is this a guy that realistically we could replace with some of the new signings that could replace his production? I don't see any way that anybody we bring in is going to immediately replace his production. And to me, that's a huge concern. My thinking is that you have 2 players, Dion Charles and Colby Bishop, that are now both in their second year after jumping all the way from 6th tier to League One last year. So, I mean, both of those guys have another year under their belts. They're going to be a year better. And I think that really you have 3 guys now in their second year, all young guys, Bishop, Charles, and then also Joe Pritchard. I think that all 3 of those players are going to have to take a massive step forward in order to kind of account for the loss of Clark.
Yeah, definitely, I agree. And for Dion Charles, this is a big season for him because, with Bishop out with an injury at the moment, Charles has got to step up. And I think this is a season that's really going to determine his fate because, there's going to be pressure on him to perform. And if he doesn't, there's going to be lots of quality on the bench for John Coleman to go to. So Charles needs to, hit the road running and and start chipping in with some goals. So, hopefully he will do that. And, I think there's goals in the squad. It's just that it's finding the right combination. And I basically, see the potential for a completely different lineup starting the season than we ended when the season's finished in March. Clarkie's going to be a big miss, but I'm confident in some of the quality signings that was brought in. That there is some goals in the squad.
Yeah, I think so. And I think people forget that with Bishop, he had 10 goals last year. With Charles, you had 8 goals last year. So that's 18 goals that you had between those two guys, which is actually 3 more than what Billy Key had with the 15 the previous season. So he didn't really lose a lot up front. One thing that I looked at is, so Billy Key was really good at 2 things. One was holding the ball up. The other one was drawing penalties. And I kind of wanted to see, how much drop-off did we have? And what I looked at is in 2019, there was 11 penalties. Billy Key converted 9 out of 11 penalties. Last year, there were 7 penalties drawn, 5 out of 7 were converted. So there was a little bit of a drop-off, but you also have to remember it was 9 fewer games. So, that's certainly an area where we're going to need to be better at it, is drawing penalties. The other thing is you have Offerandi Zanzala, who is left and gone off to Crewe Alexandra. So basically, he was a guy that's been there for 3 years. He could kind of be an impact player off the bench. That's more goals that they're going to need to be replacing. So, I mean, definitely where the scoring is going to come from is a question mark. With Bishop and Charles, you do have 2 guys who last year showed to steal a hockey term that they can put the biscuit in the basket.
Yeah, I think so. I think, there's goals up from those 2. And, the midfield is going to be the key, is getting the ball to those 2 guys. And, we're looking at a completely new midfield. But, I mean, like you said, we'll go over those players in part 2 of the breakdown.
All right. Well, I think talking about goals is a great transition into the next team. Because everything that I've kind of heard about this team is that they're expected to score a lot of goals and possibly concede a lot of goals. And that's in spite of having their leading goal scorer, Armand Nanyule, who had 15 goals last year, move on to the Turkish league. And that is Blackpool. Tony, where do you have Blackpool finishing in the table this year?
Well, I think Blackpool is going to be a team that is going to challenge for a playoff position, but I have them finishing 7th. I think they've gone through a lot of changes. A lot of the players left, like the ones you mentioned, but they've got some good signings, and they've got a manager that's got a ton of experience, Neil Critchley, who coached several years at Liverpool. And has done a good job of recruiting. So I think they're going to do okay. I got them 7th, just knocking on the door into the playoffs.
I like how you said the player I mentioned. You didn't want to try your hand at Armand Nanyule.
Well, you did well, so I'm not going to challenge you on that.
Well, I think with Blackpool, like you said, I mean, they're one of those teams where they always seem to be just kind of right on the cusp of challenging for the playoffs, but just don't quite get there. So I think 7th is pretty good. I mean, so but what do you think about Neil Critchley? I mean, I think that he's kind of a guy that if there's differing opinions on, do you think he's the guy to take them to the next level?
Yeah, I mean, he's certainly got the credentials, and he seems to, from what I've read, he seems to be, done well on his recruitment. So he's only been in the job for about 6 months. But I mean, as I say, he did manage it at the Liverpool at several levels over there. So he's come from a good background. I'm thinking he's going to have the knocking on the door, like I said. So yeah, I'm comfortable with him, doing a decent job at Blackpool.
And then, so we talked about Nandule, and one of the main guys that they brought in to replace Armand Nandule. And I spent like 10 minutes looking up different YouTube videos to make sure that I figured out how to pronounce Nandule correctly. So I'm going to say Nandule as many times as I can. But so basically, one of the main guys they brought in was Jerry Yates. And last season, so he was with Rotherham, was on loan most of the season to Swindon. He scored 13 goals for Swindon in 30 starts. He was part of that league-winning side. He came over and he had, like I said, 13 goals, 1 assist last year. Do you think that he's kind of going to be capable of replacing that production, or I don't know. I'm just not thinking that he's going to be able to quite replace all of Nandule's production.
Well, it's possible, but I mean that's where you rely on the manager. And as I said, Critchley's got the pedigree, and he's certainly coming from Liverpool. He certainly got an eye for talent. So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and saying that he's brought somebody in. Players that are going to put the, as you said, the biscuit in the basket. So I think Blackpool's going to score. With some luck, they could make the playoffs. But I got them finishing just outside.
Yeah, I think 7th is a pretty good spot for Blackpool. They're going to play a high octane style, so I mean that's certainly something that's going to help their offensive players. Let's go ahead and move on to our next team. We'll introduce them with an R, matey. It's the Pirates, the Bristol Rovers, and to me, this is another team that's going to be, well, Tony, I'll let you start off by telling where you think they're going to be, and I'll tell you if I think higher or lower.
Well, I think they're a team that's going to, I shouldn't say struggle, but they're going to have some tough matches, and I've got them finishing above the relegation zone, but just I got them in 19th position. I think they've put some of the players they brought in. It looks like they're relying on quite a few from their youth program, and not a lot of new players come in. So they're obviously going with a smaller squad. They've cut their average age down of the new players coming in around 20 years of age, and the players that are left around 25. So it looks like they're trying to go with a smaller squad. And again, the word survival comes into play with Bristol. So, I think they'll stay up, but they're going to have a long season, and I got them 19th.
19th?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. I mean, last year they finished 14th, and I definitely think that they're going to struggle to match that. Tony, like you said, I don't think that they're going to get relegated. I think that they're going to finish maybe a little bit higher than you have them at 19th, but I would say where I would put them at is somewhere in between the 14th that they finished last year and the 19th that you have them at, probably a little bit closer to the 19th. I mean, they're just one of those teams that seems to be going in the opposite direction, and there's 2 or 3 teams that, I think just kind of seem to be regressing each year, and we'll get as we go down the list. But I mean, the big thing is Johnson Clark-Harris. I mean, he was their big gun in terms of scoring goals, and with him gone, I just think it's going to be really tough for them to replace that, because I mean, when you have a a special goal scorer up top. That's a real commodity at League One, and I think
for sure.
he's going to be a real tough guy for them to replace.
Well, keeping in mind, I mean, you well could be right with what where you're predicting them, and it's quite possible from 14th down is you could to the 20th spot you could be separated by just a handful of points. So a win here, a win there could take Bristol up to 13th, 14th, and the same for Accrington. So I think that I've got about 10 teams that are in that bottom group that are really going to be what people would refer to as in the relegation battle, and Bristol's one of them with a couple of wins here or there. Then obviously they'll move up, but. 19th, it might be hard on them, but I mean, when you look at the other positions, the teams as we go through them, I think from my point of view, you'll see why I've got them at 19.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely, and I mean, I think one thing to look at, and not that last season always means a whole lot, but it certainly means something. Even though they finished 3 places higher than Accrington in the table, their goal difference was worse. They were a -11 last year compared to Accrington was -6. The other thing I look at is, so they scored 38 goals, which is 1.09 per game, which, that's just not real good. And then you look at Clark Harris had 13 of those. So that's 33% of their goals walking out of the door for a team that was already struggling to score. I mean, it's going to be tough. Plus, they allowed 49 goals, which honestly isn't all that great on defense.
Well, I know, and I think one of the tough things is, and this is where you and I might sort of have different points of view on it, is that the stats from last year, when you look at what's going on with the teams and players that they've released in the change of the squad for Accrington, for example, it's hard to compare the stats from last year's team to this year's team. And I think Bristol is one of them because, as I say, they seem to be going with the youth movement, and with that comes inexperience. And if a team drops, so if one team moves up, one team has to drop. And I just see Bristol as a team that may drop a few spots, but have enough there to stay in the league.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm looking at the players that they brought in, I noticed they have a Jaden Mitchell-Lawson that is coming on loan from Derby County. That's the only loan that I see that they brought in. It says he's an attacking midfielder. So I mean, he's certainly somebody that I think that they're probably going to be counting on for some offense.
Well, and the other one too, Phil, is Zane Westbrook is come in from Coventry, another central midfielder that I think that's going to a lot of the play is going to go through him and Mitchell Lawson that you mentioned. So they're hoping to get some output from them, and I just think they've just got they brought in a center forward that's from non-league, so they're doing what Accrington did before. And as I say, relying on some youth players. So I think it's going to be a hard season for them. But again, as I said, I think they've got enough to stay up.
So next up, we have the Brewers. And for those of you who aren't familiar, the Brewers are Burton, Albion.
Not the Milwaukee Brewers.
The last 2 teams that we've had are the Brewers and the Pirates, but this isn't a National League baseball game. So
yeah.
the Brewers are Burton Albion, and so they're a very interesting team because they went up as far as the championship. They're a small club, really not much bigger than Accrington. They got relegated back down 2 years ago. Last year, they finished 11th in the table. They've recently parted ways with longtime manager Nigel Clough. So I think that's going to be a big hit. A lot of people have them getting relegated this year. Where do you have them, Tony?
Well, I think they're an experienced squad, so I don't see them in the bottom 4. I've got them at 15th, and this is one of the teams that you could easily switch Burton Albion with Bristol Rovers. there's not a heck of a lot of difference. But Burton going with a player manager, and I think that's a sign of some cost cutting. And they've only brought in a few players. Some of the players they brought in, the average age of the new arrivals is 28. So they're going with a smaller squad but experienced. They've released. They didn't release a lot, so they never had a big squad. But I think they're banking on a small squad with experience. I think they'll be okay. But as I say, when I said 15th, I could easily have them at 18th and 19th. But I just think with the experience is enough to keep them, above the relegation mark.
I really worry about a few things with them. Because I kind of compare it in some ways to like the Eddie Howe situation in Bournemouth, where he had been there for so long, had a small team punching above their weight. I think that losing Clough, that's certainly going to hurt them at a small club more than it would if it was a big club, especially when you're bringing in a first-time manager, a player manager, no less. I mean, like you said, that screams out cost cutting. And then the other thing is that concerns me about them is so their kind of big signing of the off season is Kane Hemmings. I'm just not blown away with the signing. I mean, I think he's a guy that's proven he could be a very good goal scorer at League Two, but then when he jumps up to League One, the numbers really seem to drop off. I mean, just look at Kane Hemmings, and he's a 28-year-old center forward. So I mean, he's been around for a while. He's in the prime of his career. So I mean, certainly, he's going to be as good right now at this age as he's ever been. But just looking at his career, when he's played in League Two, for instance, in 2018-19, League Two, Notts County, 14 goals. 2017-18, League Two, Mansfield, 15 goals. 2016-17, Oxford United, League One, 6 goals. Barnsley, League One, 2014-15, 3 goals.
Well, I see them as a team that's going to, they're going to try and, get wins 2-1 or 1-0 or draws and stuff like that. I don't see them as, like you say, a free scoring team. But I think they're banking on experience, and there's something to be said for that, because they've certainly got an experienced squad. And they played a decent game against Stanley. So when you look at if you're comparing the teams, as I said, I've got them at 15th, but they could be in the mix. They're going to be in the mix with Accrington and a few of the other teams that will come to in that bottom grouping. So again, win or two here and there could make a difference between 19th to 15th, but I think they'll be okay. It's just that I think they're going with a smaller, experienced squad and want to ride this thing out from a financial point of view, and then rebuild from when the salary cap comes off.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're a team that the salary cap is going to help long term. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to stay up with what they've lost and not bringing so much back in. But it's like you said, they're going to be one of those teams that's battling. Yeah. Now, the next team on the list here is an interesting one, because this is a team that got relegated from the championship. They're having some off-the-field issues, which I don't want to get into too much. Where do you have Charlton at, Tony?
Well, this is a tough one to handicap, because, like you say, they are having some issues, and they were trying to get a player in, I believe, from Chelsea, one of the top teams anyway. They're trying to bring him on loan, and it fell through because of the off-field issues. It's going to be a tough season for them. I've got them at 14th. I think they'll be okay. They've still got players, that have played in the championship. This is, as I said, it's a hard one to handicap for these guys, but I got them 14th, and again, it could be lower, but I don't see them finishing in the top half really because of what's going on. They've got a good manager in Lee Boyer who will do a good job. It's just I think it's going to be a long season for the Athletics.
Yeah, I mean, it really just kind of shows you how quickly things can change. Because, I mean, 2 years ago, this was a team that went on a run late in the season, got promoted in the championship. Now here they are, about a year and a half after that, and we're looking at them. They're back in League One. They're having all these financial issues, and it's just we're talking about, okay, is this a team where, like you said, if they can't get the players to sign up, are they going to find themselves in a relegation battle? And I mean, this is a big club too. I mean, this is a big club for this level. And then just kind of looking at it, so they've got they have Lyle Taylor. It just seems like every club has lost their talisman, if you will. That so Lyle Taylor, he had 11 goals for them last year in the championship. He actually ended up signing away with Nottingham Forest. And then they brought in a guy, Connor Washington, from Hearts, which is a team in Scotland, to replace him. So it just seems like almost every team we've gone over so far has lost their big scorer from the year before and replace them with somebody cheaper. And I think this is just kind of one of those themes that the COVID situation and the salary cap, and then, obviously you throw in a team like Charlton that's having even bigger problems than that. And it's not a good situation. And that's why maybe we see some of these teams like Burton that you mentioned, maybe they don't quite struggle as much with the losses, because a lot of the other teams, like I think at the beginning of the program, you had said most teams have more guys going out than coming in.
Yeah, I think they've obviously got, as we said, they've got issues, and I think it's just a question of regrouping for Charlton and staying in the league and not running into any financial issues. It's certainly a team that don't want to run into any points reduction and end up with you get 12 points knocked off, and we see what happened to Wigan and to Bolton. It's really devastating, especially a team that it's going to be struggling in the middle of the pack. If they finish, as I said, at 14th and you take 12 points off them, that puts them smack dab in the relegation zone, and they don't want to do that. So, I think it's all hands on deck at Charlton, and I think if you asked Lee Boyer now, would he be happy with 14th? I think he'd snap your hand off.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think that it's one of those years where, unless you're one of the really big clubs, I think anything that you're going to stay up is going to be a good season. And then the next club that we come up to, and one of the things that's kind of surprised me the most in a lot of the previews and other podcasts and things like that I've taken a look at is just how much respect the promoted League Two teams are getting. I mean, it seems like other than Northampton, nobody really has any of the promoted teams in the relegation zone. Crewe Alexandra being one of those teams, and they were a team that they really they just had a solid all around season. I remember they actually knocked Stanley out of one of the cup competitions. I want to say maybe it was the FA Cup last year. So where do you have Crewe? Are you one of these people that's on board with the idea that teams like Crewe might finish upper mid-table?
No, no, I'm not. I know. I think they're going to be in that group of 8 or 9, 10 teams that are going to, battle relegation. I've got them. Believe it or not, and you probably not going to agree with this, but I got them. I got them at 20th behind Bristol Rovers. I just don't think. The step up. I think it's going to be hard for them, and I just have a feeling with Crewe that they're not going to be able to maintain that momentum, it's the one team that I struggle with, because I thought, could they get into the mid table, but I just don't think they're up to that, and I've got them 20th. They'll stay up, but again, I think they're going to be in that group for a relegation battle.
Well, I think that you're a touch lower than where I would have them, but I don't think they're ready to finish upper table either. They're kind of one of those teams where it's really unknown. They had a lot of moving parts. The guy that they brought in that'd be of interest to our listeners is Offerandi Zonsala from Accrington Stanley. I'm just looking at here. He's a guy that could be in play for their starting center forward role. Do you think that's going to be a good move for him?
Well, I think that's where that's one of the reasons why I think they may not finish in that mid-table range, because I think Ozzy is, and I think we've seen that at Stanley. He's his biggest impact is when he's off the bench, and I know he's started a few matches for Stanley, and those matches he started, he didn't seem to have the impact on the match like he would when he comes on, because he's a fast player and he comes on the last 15, 20 minutes and runs at those defenders where they might be slowing up a step or two, and he has a bigger impact. So I'm not totally convinced he's the starting, if he is the starting center forward, that's enough for them to challenge. I think they'll get some goals and he'll draw some penalties, because he goes over really, I don't say easily, but he does go down in the box. And so I think I think if they're relying on him for the starting job, I think that's where they may struggle. And as I say, that's why I've got them just above the drop zone.
They had Chris Porter and Daniel Powell last year were their two main goal scorers. Chris Porter, he had 12 goals for them last year, and then Powell, he had 9 goals. Porter, he is 36 years old this year, so he's still listed with the club. I don't know if he's going to give it another go-round or not. Maybe you kind of have to think that he might be getting close to the end of his career, but then again, he put in 12 goals last year. Powell, he's also listed with the team still, so I think it'll probably be maybe Powell fighting it out with Zonsala for the starting center.
Well, and the center back down on the back line too. They've got Nicky Hunt, who was a Stanley player, hasn't been for Stanley for a few years. He's 36 years old, still playing, so he may have slowed down a step or two. So I think there's question marks on the defense and question marks up front enough that it just doesn't put them in. It puts them in a relegation battle, plain and simple. For me, anyway, that's my take on them.
Yeah, and then they also lost Jamie Jones. He was somebody that it's been mentioned as one of their key losses. He ended up with Lincoln City. And Lincoln City, they're a team that we'll get you here pretty shortly. They're a team that it really has made a lot of moves during the offseason. But so next in line, we have a team that might be a little bit out of their element here. Did you watch that movie yet, Tony?
No, I haven't. So I don't get the joke, but I'm sure some of our listeners will.
And that is Donny or Doncaster, the Doncaster Rovers. And I think one of the most interesting things about them is, of course, that is the team that Joseph Bursick who is Accrington's starting keeper the second half of last season, went to. What is your outlook for Donny?
Well, actually, I think, I like the manager they've got, the Darren Moore, and I think he's got a ton of experience, and I just like what he does with his team. And I've got them, believe it or not, I got them up at 8th position. I don't think when I say 8th, I think they're going to be far enough removed from the playoff picture, but I think they're going to be, if you want to say, the best of the rest in that mid-table group. I like what he's done with Bursic, and I just, I think he's got the ability to bring out the best, and I like Darren Moore, and I think he'll have a good season with Doncaster.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Bursic is a stud keeper who's going to play at a higher level. My main concern when I look at Doncaster is they lost Kieran Sadler, who was their best goal scorer, 11 goals, 6 assists. He's gone on to the championship to Rotherham. And when I look at their incoming transfers, I just don't really see anybody that is going to replace that scoring output.
No, that's a good point. It's one of those. I think if it goes right for Doncaster, they'll finish 8th, and if they don't get the scoring, they could be down in that group of 8 or 10 at the bottom. In the relegation battle. It's just, I think, it looks like he might be building a team from the back out, and if he does that, then he's going to try and steal some points here and there. And like we said before, the transfer season is not over, and I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't bring in some form of striker or in the either loan or probably a loan player or a permanent signing. But I think they'll be well coached to the point where I just feel that he gets a goal scorer in, and they'll be in the top half.
Yeah, I think you have them a little high. I mean, one of the things that I mentioned earlier when we were talking about Bristol Rovers is that there's certain teams that just kind of seem to take a little step back each year, and I feel like Doncaster has been one of those teams. I don't think they're going to get relegated or anything like that. I see them maybe more like 12.
It's quite possible. As I say, there's going to be that mid group of teams anywhere from, I think there's going to be a gap from the top 7. And then you're going to have the next mid group of teams, say from the 8th to the 14th, 15th. And then, there could be that group in the middle, and then the bottom group fighting out for against relegation. If they don't get a goal scorer, you could switch. You could switch Doncaster with Burton or Charlton or Swindon. We haven't got to Swindon yet, but my point is that you could switch them with a team that could be in the bottom half if they don't get somebody who can score. But I think he's building, as I said, building a team to defend. And if you can do that in this league and steal a goal here and there or get a scorer in, I think I could see them finishing the top half. But if they don't get a goal scorer, then let's bets are off.
Yeah, I think that that's definitely kind of what we're looking at with them. I mean, I think that they had lost their keeper. They did a good job of replacing that. It's really about replacing the goals. They have been able to hang on to Ben Whiteman for now, so that's certainly in their favor. If he leaves, as had been rumored, then I think they could drop even further. But let's move on to the first team that I'm going to kind of say is one that I think see near the top. And that's what I hate to say because I am not a fan of the COD Army, but where do you have Fleetwood finishing this year?
Well, actually, I got Fleetwood just finishing in the last playoff position. I've got them at 6th. I think they're a team that, with Joey Barton, any team, he seems to have them in the mix. And, they had a decent season last year. And I don't see any reason why he can't do the same with them this season. So, I think they're going to battle for Blackpool for the sixth and final playoff spot. But I gave the edge to Fleetwood.
Yeah, I think that you're pretty close on there. I mean, just looking at them, we've talked about a lot of different people, a lot of different teams that have lost massive losses, and I just don't see that they've lost as much as most teams have. Joey Burton, he's certainly proven that he's a decent manager at this level. The biggest thing for me, though, is the acquisition of Callum Camps. This is a guy, when he was with Rochdale, that just absolutely killed Accrington every time. And I know this isn't a good basis of anything necessarily, but it's certainly something. Anytime you would watch Rochdale versus Accrington, Callum Camps was the guy that the announcer would say his name the most times, if that makes sense. This is just a guy, he always seems to be around the ball. I think it's just a huge, huge acquisition for them.
Well, I think they seem to have, when the players they brought in have seemed to sort of strengthen their midfield. And, obviously, Joey thought that was an area they needed to address. He certainly brought in some, a few, midfield players. He brought in a fellow from Rangers, Jordan Rossiter, and as you said, you mentioned Camps. Those are players that are going to have an impact on the team.
Another guy they brought in is Mark Duffy. He's 34 years old. He comes over from Sheffield United. He didn't play last year in the Premier League. But the season before that, he played on the promotion championship side for Sheffield, had 6 goals and 6 assists then. He's just an assist machine. He had 15 assists for Swindon in League One in 2013. So he's a winger. So, Camps, he's going to be more of like your number 8 guy. Duffy, at 34 years old, he might not have every game starter, but he's a guy that could certainly be an impact player that you'd bring in at the wing position that can start firing in those crosses into the box. This is a team that, I think that even 6 might even be a little bit low. And I just hate to say it because they're one of my least favorite clubs.
Well, and as I say, he's, like you said, he brought in that midfield player, Mark Duffy, that he brought in.
He's experienced. He's won championships or won promotions before.
Well, he's Joey Barton he brought in a player a couple of seasons ago, Dean Marney from Burnley, a midfield player with experience, and it looks like he's done the same thing again, bringing in this gentleman and Mark Duffy. So obviously he likes some experience in the midfield because that's the type of he was an experienced midfield player when he was at Burnley, was Joey Barton. So obviously it's a role that he thinks important. So yeah, I got them 6, but I think in that bottom 4th, 5th, and 6th position in the playoff round, you could interchange all 3 teams that I've got in those 4th, 5th, and 6th spots. So yeah, they could finish as 4th, but I got them as 6 because I think sometimes Fleetwood just seems to fall up at the wrong time, and I got them in the playoffs, but I got them at 6th.
Yeah, I think that they're a solid playoff team.
Yeah.
Now let's move on to the Gills. And Gillingham, they're certainly one of those other smaller clubs that's kind of punching above their weight to be in this division. So where do you have them at?
Well, I got them in the top half. I got them at 9th. I think they've gone through they've brought in a lot of players and they've released a lot. Again, this is Gillingham could be, they could be down in that 15, 16 spot, but it's. I don't think they're going to challenge for the playoffs, but I think they've got enough with the manager Steve Evans to put them in the top half. And as I say, I got them at ninth, but that could easily change if they don't start the season well or run into a dry spell. But this is a tough team to handicap. But I think definitely top half. And as I said, I got them at ninth.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're definitely one of those teams where they're always going to be more successful than they should be based on their manager, kind of like an Accrington. One thing that is probably worth mentioning is that so we talked about Bristol earlier, kind of how they had lost some guys and not brought a lot in on offense. One guy that they did bring in on defense that was a big loss for Gillingham is Max Emmer. I mean, he's 28 years old, center back. I mean, he's the kind of guy that you kind of anchor your defense around. How big of a loss do you think that's going to be for them? I mean, this is a team last year that they only allowed 34 goals. So they were very strong on defense. They didn't score a lot of goals, so I think that with Max Emmer gone, that they're certainly going to need to score more goals this year than they did last year.
Well, yeah, because I think they've gone for some youth in the center back position. Bringing in I think they've brought in 3 players in that area, and they're all in that 20 to 22 year age group. I think one's from Hull City. They've got a player from, center back from Arsenal under 23s. So they're banking on some, playing time to improve them. And anytime you lose a player like you mentioned Max Emmer, I think, it's going to be tough to replace, and they may do that by committee or till they find, or unless someone of those players they brought in takes the role and runs with it. But it's going to be hard to replace him. But
to give you an idea of just how hard to replace he's going to be, there was 2 players last year that started 35 games and played all 3,150 minutes. One of them was the keeper, Jack Bottom. He's still around, but the other one was Emmer.
Yeah, as I say, how do you replace them? It's tough to do that, and again, this is it. These teams in the middle of the pack are hard to handicap because if it doesn't come together, they could drop like a stone, and you've got to put Gillingham in that group, and if they don't, if it doesn't come together, and he doesn't, But I got, I like Steve Evans. He's got experience. He's as a manager, so I think he'll do okay with the squad, and he'll bring out the best of the players that he's brought in.
Yeah, I mean, one player that I actually really like that they brought in is John Akindi. He's a guy that was part of the Lincoln City exodus, if you will. He had 15 goals and 7 assists for the League Two team that won the championship 2 years ago in 2018-19. He's had a 26-goal, a 23-goal season in League Two for Barnet, a 31-goal season for Barnet when they were in the conference. So, I mean, this guy can score goals. Last season, he only started 3 games in League One, got into 23, still netted 5 goals and 2 assists. And if I recall properly, one of those was against Accrington on opening day. Yeah, it was. It was a penalty kick that he put in against Accrington on opening day. So, I mean, he's a big guy. He's the kind of guy that when he gets into the 18-yard box, he's going to clear out everybody around him. And, he's maybe kind of like a Romelu Lukaku kind of player.
Yeah. You make a good point. As I've mentioned with a couple of teams, I put a lot of faith into the manager of the team and sort of what their track record is. And if you look at Steve Evans, he's got experience in and around this division. He averages well over 1.5 a game, and if you do the math, that gives you enough points to stay up in the division. And I think his experience in with teams like Mansfield, Peterborough, and the spell at Leeds, he seems to bring in gets results. So I think he'll have enough there to keep them in. I keep, when I say keep them in, I'm going to put them in the top half.
All right. Well, I think that's going to be a little high for them. I mean, once again, I don't think they're a relegation team, but I think maybe like between 11th and 13th somewhere.
Well, yeah, anywhere in mid-table, I think is going to be an acceptable.
I mean, it's one of those things where, in League One, 9th place and 19th place might be separated by 6 points when we're all said and done.
Yeah, I think they're in that group of teams that, like with Doncaster and a couple of other teams that we'll get to, that, if things go their way, they'll finish in their higher position. But if they, if they get some off to a poor start or some bad results, then sometimes it's hard for teams to recover if they don't have a lot of strength. But I just see the track record he has. That I see them, finishing in the top half, and I may be high with 9th, but I think the consensus is that they are a top 10 team. The bottom part of the top 10, though.
All right. Well, up next, we have a team that is one of the teams that got relegated from the championship. Hull City, and I have a funny story about when I was doing some research on Hull City, and I want to start with this because this player isn't with them anymore, has actually gone back to his parent club, which is Liverpool under 23 team. But so there's a player, no relation, but his name is Herbie Kane, and evidently Herbie Kane went on loan to Hull last January. If for some reason when I read that, all I can imagine is some drunk guy in a pub in Hull seeing H. Kane goes on loan to Hull, like scroll across the bottom of the TV. And just buy the whole round, a whole pub around of Jaeger bombers. And then afterwards, everybody's like, hey, it's not the same HK.
Well, yeah, he'd have to be really drunk if he bought into that because, Hull is not a team that you're going to see Harry Kane had in any time soon. But, I'm sure he gets mixed up a bit with that.
So now that we're past that nonsense, where do you have them finishing in League One this year, Tony?
Well, I got them at 10th, and I as I said, they're in that group of teams that we talked about, Doncaster, Gillingham, and Hull. They're with them dropping down. They're the highest finishing team that have been relegated. I think they're going to do the best of the 3 teams that came down. They've got experience, and I think they're not going to be in the playoff position, but I think they're going to be a team that's going to be, they're too good to drop down into the lower parts of the division. But having said that, like any other teams we've mentioned in that middle group, they could drop a bit. But for the purpose of this prediction show, where I've got them at 10.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're one of those teams that I don't know. I guess when I look at this, any of the teams that were in League One last year, I think I kind of have a clear picture of where I think that they should be. Any of the teams dropping down, it's so hard to say because, you can have a team that just looks absolutely brilliant in one division, and then they move up and they get sent right back down. And then there's another team. There could be another team that just looks like they barely got promoted or barely got relegated. And then they do the double drop. I mean, I think that with any of these teams that are dropping down from the championship, I think the salary cap is going to be a huge thing because, I mean, yes, I understand that the players that they have now, they go on average salary and all that, but, how many of those guys are going to want to stick around and play in a league lower? And, it's just, I think that kind of adds a whole extra step of it. You also have their captain, Eric Lecage. He's one of the guys that left. I mean, it just seems like they've lost a lot. And they brought a lot of guys in too. I mean, they're one of these teams that has a huge turnover. Grant McCann, who's their manager, he has definitely experience at this tier with other clubs of this size. I think that maybe a touch lower than where you have them.
Well, I mean, this is the top. I think the top teams are easy to pick, and some of the bottom ones are a bit easier. But it's that group in the middle, and but I just don't see them having enough to challenge for playoff, and I don't see them being poor enough to go into the relegation zone. So. I mean, 10th is they could be anywhere from 10th to 14th, but I think they've got enough experience and enough to keep them in that in the top half.
Yeah, I think that you're on target. I mean, they're just one of those teams that's going to be in that traffic jam at the beginning. And then, the next team, I'm absolutely shocked that this team is on the list because I thought they were just going to walk this league last year. It scored 110 points, but instead they finished 11th, and that's our good friends, the Tractor Boys. Where do you have Ipswich Town finishing this year, Tony?
Well, I actually got them in the playoff position, and there, as I said, I mentioned before, where there's the 4th, 5th, and 6th team could all sort of interchange. I got Ipswich at 5th, and I think they've got the core of the team that's still there. They brought in they got a good signing in Oliver Hawkins, the center forward they brought in from Portsmouth. They've got an experienced left back in Steve Ward that used to play at Burnley, for experience. So I think they've obviously they got Caden Jackson, who I expect to have a good season. I think they'll definitely be in the hunt and definitely in the playoff position. And I've got them at, as I say, just for the sake of picking a position, I got them at 5th. They could finish 4th, but I definitely be in the playoff position.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're definitely the team that had the least roster turnover from last year.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is a team where you've got guys sitting out. Now, one thing I've heard about is that James Norwood might be on his way out. Have you heard anything about that?
No, I haven't heard anything, on that in the research I did, but I mean, it's quite possible. But I do agree they've got, they've got probably one of the least number of changes to the squad than anybody else.
There was one huge one though, which was Luke Garbutt, and this was a guy that was on loan from Everton, and I remember him from last season. He's just kind of one of those I'll say it right here. He had 5 goals and 3 assists as a defender. So he's just really a two-way threat, and he was the guy that I thought he was their best player in the games that I watched.
Yeah, I mean, it's just that they seem to have a squad that they've kept together, and I like the manager Paul Lambert. He's got experience, at all levels. It really is Paul Lambert, and I think he's got enough with his squad and in himself that they're definitely going to be in the playoff position. I don't see them, finishing any outside the playoffs. I think they'll do well enough to challenge the top group. But I've got them, as I said, I got them at 5th.
Yeah, I mean, I think Caden Jackson is definitely a guy that is getting better and better every year. I hate to say that. I mean, he had 11 goals, 7 assists last year. Of course, I know he scored one of those goals against Accrington in that second meeting when he came back to the Wham Stadium. And I think that when it comes to Accrington fans and anybody involved with the team, and you kind of ask if there was any one player that you could have back, who would it be? There's 2 names that come up, and the other name is one that we'll get to later with a team later in the alphabet. But one of them, and probably the one that you hear the most, is certainly Caden Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he went, when he was having great success at Stanley, and he did have a tough adjustment period at Ipswich because they changed managers, and when there's a change in manager, sometimes you have to sort of prove yourself all over again. But I expect that this will be a season where he's settled in. He's got a manager that knows him, and I think he'll have a better season. And as far as a sure thing, I think they're as good as a sure thing to make the playoffs this season. I see them learning from, what they did wrong in the second half of last season where they started going down a bit. But I see them as a strong team in this division.
Well, absolutely. And I think that it's hard to see them not making the playoffs. I think this is going to be a year where you do kind of see some of the bigger teams separate themselves just because so many of the smaller teams did have to offload. And I think that they're probably not an automatic promotion team, but I could certainly see them even getting up to 3rd or 4th. But Tony, I think this is our 12th team so far. So now's a good time for us to take a short break, and then we will be back with part 2.